change and environmental justice. This is the fifth in a series of learning sessions where we've had the privilege to learn from folks who are doing the work on the ground in schools and communities to tackle the challenge of climate change. We are trying in this conversation to focus on career and technical education, but also informal learning opportunities that address readiness for careers that work on issues of climate change and environmental justice. And we're excited to have a great lineup of panelists. So appreciate all the commissioners making time for this conversation, our panelists for joining us, and certainly those who are watching in the internet audience. Before I turn over to Governor Whitman, I do want to acknowledge the events this week in Atlanta, the horrific events in Atlanta, and also acknowledge more broadly our collective commitment to ending hate and racism and our shared conviction as members of this commission, but as members of a broader American community that anti-Asian, anti-Asian American, anti-Pacific Islander hate is anathema to who we are as Americans. And just as we are committed to making sure we protect our existence on this planet through addressing climate change, we are also committed to protecting the strength and health of our communities and our respect for human dignity. So just wanted to make sure we all took a moment to acknowledge those events. So with that, I will turn it to you, Governor Whitman.
Oh, thank you, Secretary. And I echo everything that you've said. It's been a tough year so far. Things didn't turn around on a pivot on a head of a pin as we all had hoped would happen. But again, I think what we're doing with this Aspen undertaking is addressing one of the critical issues, but in a way that can bring people together. And once again, Aspen has pulled together a panel of outside experts that cover the scope, a broad scope of experience. And we are trying to figure it. In this one, we're really going to focus on how schools, career and technical education schools, as well as out of school programs can help us address the issue of climate change through the educational system, using every part of it. And I think that's the key. What we're going to do is our usual program is we're going to hear from each of the panelists first, and then Secretary King and I will ask questions. It's open then to commissioners to ask questions. And those of you who are watching can put a question into the chat room. And if we don't get to it, we will certainly try to have an answer for you after the session is over. I want to introduce two of our panelists. Amare Fiji is a grassroots development coordinator with the Maine Environmental Education Association, where she advocates for intersectional climate justice solutions, equitable access to the outdoors, and empowering youth to spark change in their local communities. She was also named a National Geographic Young Explorer. Herb Lee is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Pacific American Foundation. He's a native Hawaiian and has led multiple and highly successful, gifted, and talented youth leadership programs in career planning and development, STEM education, and culture-based curriculum programs, which fit in perfectly to the kinds of things we're going to be discussing today. So with that, I will turn it back to Secretary King, and I look forward to this panel, and I also thank all of those who have taken the time to be on this call.
Thanks so much, Governor. I want to introduce Diallo Shabazz, who's the Managing Director of Braven Solutions and Director of the New York PTech Leadership Council. Diallo specializes in educational models that prepare youth and adults for a sustainable future and to work in industries accelerating the adoption of green technologies. And having been involved in the early days of PTech, it makes me very happy to see how PTech has grown and the role that PTech is playing in building partnerships that prepare young people for jobs in sustainability. So thrilled to have Diallo with us. And then we have Kevin A. Ten, who is the Superintendent of Schools in the Bayfield School District. Dr. A. Ten has spent 30 years as an educator, principal, and superintendent in his home state of Colorado. So thank you all again for joining us today. And Amara, we will start with you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Super excited to be part of this conversation and to share a little bit more about the work that I do. So I guess I can go ahead and start. I think I'm resharing my slides. Awesome.
Wrong slide.
So I guess I can start off with kind of my experience as a youth. I grew up in the DC metropolitan area, and I come from an immigrant household. And so I lived in a house that had about 14 people living in it at one point. And so I really found a deep connection with the environment because it was a place that really I could be my own. It gave me a lot of solace engaging with the outdoors. But even with that, it was really hard for me to engage with the outdoors, one, given my location in such an urban setting, but also given parts of my identity. In engaging with the outdoors, it is really hard if one does not have the economic means to do so. So I grew up in Maine after moving from Maryland. And so the trade-off was sometimes, having food on the table or buying snow pants and snow boots to be able to go outside. Similarly, there is the single story of who is supposed to engage in STEM, engage in the environment, and that is traditionally those who identify as male. And so because of that, because of these barriers to access, I didn't really have many outdoor learning opportunities. And it was really in self-seeking these opportunities that I was able to explore my passion. And so what I did was the summer going into my senior year of high school, I organized the Stormwater Management and Research Team Summer Institute. I had gone to a similar event a couple years earlier, but as many things do, this event ran out of funding. And so I really wanted to make this event for students at my high school in particular, but also students who have traditionally faced marginalization when it comes to engaging with the outdoors. So over the course of about 3 months, I was able to secure grant funding. I was coordinating with my school about the location as well as the sites that we were going to. And I had tremendous support from so many educators in our STEM program. And at the beginning of the event, the students were expressing how they were so deterred from pursuing environmental STEM or STEM in general, stating that that was the only science course that they would ever do, and that they were no longer going to explore science in the future. But at the end of the Institute, these testimonies completely flipped. And these students were sharing how they were so excited to take science courses in the fall when the school year began again, and engage with the program throughout the spring and through the school year. And so all of the students who attended the Institute were able to continue on in the program. They led research and were actually all awarded some kind of recognition at the Maine State Science Fair for their environmental STEM research focused on water quality and climate change. And this learning wasn't only transformative because it was an opportunity that allowed me to explore and assert my passion, but also led me to commit to providing these opportunities for other youth through the work that I do with the Maine Environmental Education Association. Next slide, please. So with the Maine Environmental Education Association, we have a youth network of over 400 youth across the state of Maine. And this network is called the Maine Environmental Changemakers. We host a 2-day intergenerational gathering where youth can explore intersectional environmentalism. We also connect youth with funding opportunities, job opportunities, and the resources they need to spark local change in their communities. We've had youth go on to hold office positions, really championing for state level environmental action, as well as lead environmental initiatives at their schools and spark statewide policy shifts towards more equitable access to the outdoors and climate justice education. And so all in all, I'm just so incredibly fortunate to have had the opportunities to engage with such powerful out of school environmental learning initiatives and provide such learning opportunities for youth across the state of Maine, because in doing so, I have been really able to witness how transformative these opportunities are in empowering youth to realize the future that they want to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amara. That was inspiring. We will turn now to Herb Lee.
Okay, are you able to see that? Things good?
Yes.
Okay. Aloha, my name is Herb Lee. I'm part of the Pacific American Foundation. We're a 501c3 in Hawaii. And I just want to start by saying that, you know, content and context are inextricably intertwined in Hawaii. So place has a lot to do with how we educate our youth. And this is a picture of our fish pond that I want to share with you and tell you a little story about. Let me go to the next slide. So these are just highlights. So the word aina in Hawaii means that which feeds. And so our history, we have 1,000-year history as indigenous people in the middle of the Pacific that has had a really intimate relationship with the land and the sea. And we actually consider it almost part of our family. And in the 21st century, there's been a huge disconnect of students understanding how they are connected, where food comes from, and the kuleana, or the responsibility that they have to continue to steward these very important places that sustain life, and that we are really part of a global community. So these are just some of the highlights of what we've done over the last 25 years. And the basic idea is that if we can get students to be able to understand what aloha aina means, how we can love the land, then hopefully we can be inspired to malama aina, which means to care for it. So this is a quick story. So our context, which is sort of what we call our pico, or the center of everything that we do now, has been an ancient Hawaiian fish pond that is 400 years old. We've been restoring it for the past 25 years, since 1995. And it has actually become a catalyst for the new sort of communities as a school concept, and being able to, you know, teach all of the 4 core areas of math, science, social studies, language arts in the context of place. And the pond, it represents now many of these places in Hawaii where students and schools and families are going out to understand how that content knowledge is intertwined with the places in which we live. Waikalua Local Fish Pond was considered one of the most endangered historic sites in Hawaii way back in 2011. And it was almost like a call to arms for many of us in Hawaii to preserve these places, in addition to providing opportunities for which to learn and steward places that were important to us that we've kind of lost a connection to. This real quickly is a quick overview of the importance of these ponds. These ponds are sort of like a litmus test for what we call the ahupua'a, or the land division that flows from the mountain to the sea. And it was a source of food that brought nutrients from the mountains coming all the way down from the streams into the fish pond and into the ocean. And what we've been trying to do is to sort of restore this mindset and have communities understand that this is a vibrant process that has been handed down to us for a long time. And we have a lot of problems as a result of not only global climate change, but, you know, taking responsibility for our actions that we have caused, you know, in both the nearshore environment as well as on the land. This is another picture of our pond. You can kind of see the mountains in the background. That's where it's raining right now, and all that water flows down into this main body of water, which is called Kaneohe Bay. It is one of the largest embayments in the Pacific, and it is part of the Smithsonian Institute's Marine Geosite, which is a global Earth observatory, which includes our fish pond. And that started in 2015, and we're a part of that. So as I said, Waikalua Loko, our fish pond, is become a pico or a center of everything that we do, our education programs, and having, you know, communities and schools and families connect to place. So these are some of the things that we've done. I never got a chance to do this when I was growing up, but now over the last 25 years, we provided, you know, some really, really great, what we call hands-on opportunities. In Hawaiian, we call it makahanaka ike. The knowledge comes from the doing, actually doing. And what these kids are doing in the fish pond is actually corralling fish into a net. And then they bring up the net and they identify, you know, what's going on and what they catch in the pond. This is a phytoremediation project. You know, we've designed many projects. This is using native plants to basically phytoremediate the water and the nearshore environment. And what happens is that the roots grow under it, and the roots basically absorb all of the, you know, the pollution that's in the water. So I'm just going to kind of go through really quickly because I know I don't have a lot of time, but these are just some, you know, pictures of some of the activities that we do at the pond. This is engaging students. This is, again, looking at different aspects of what we do. That picture in the middle is seaweed. We were taking about 100 tons out of our pond at one point in time in our pond, which are all invasive. And, you know, it was a great opportunity to learn. We've trained over 6,000 teachers now in the curriculum that we've developed over 20 years, which is place-based, culture-based, and project-based. We've done, we work with the University of Hawaii, and we've done that picture that you see on the left is an autonomous, like a drone. It actually goes and, you know, takes pictures underwater and things like that. And we've incorporated a lot of technology to do virtual, you know, in the COVID time, to do virtual learning, using drone technology, using all the technology to bring these places to the kids at home, you know, virtually. And we've had tremendous success in doing that. So this is just kind of a quick summary of, you know, what I just mentioned about our fish pond. And then we've actually, in the first 20 years, we didn't own it, but now we've acquired it as a result of getting some HUD monies to acquire it. And it's become, it'll become a perpetual community classroom, you know, for generations to come. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of this. This is our partner with Smithsonian Institute that I mentioned. There, I think, are 7 or 8 of these geosites or global Earth observatories on the planet. And the idea and our commitment that we have to them is a 30-year commitment to be able to collect information and data from these places to inform global scientists about what's happening with global climate change. This is a Clouds to Coral virtual learning experience that we have. And if you have time, you can go to our website to see what it looks like to actually go into the ocean and go into the clouds and understand all these interrelationships that we have that reinforce all the things that we're doing in you know, in the islands. So real quickly, you know, our after school program was designed, the 21st Century Community Learning Center was designed to be able to have the schools that don't have a lot of time to go out into the community. Actually, we take the kids out into the community and now virtually, you know, to get these, to restore some of these connections to place so that we can go back to that idea of content and context are inextricably intertwined in everything that we do for education, stewardship, and engaging families and students in new profound ways in the 21st century so that we can do a better job in curtailing, you know, global climate change and some of the problems that we have within our own communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That was fantastic. As a former social studies teacher, I love the connection across content areas with history and science and math. Really wonderful. Diallo, turn to you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, so thank you, commissioners, for inviting me to present on this important topic today. This is the 10-year anniversary of P-TECH, actually. 10 years ago, we launched our first P-TECH school in Brooklyn. As many of you know, P-TECH, which stands for Pathways in Technology, is a 6-year early college high school model. The idea of P-TECH is not simply to make high school longer, but to ensure that every student has an opportunity to complete a free 2-year associate's degree in a STEM field before leaving the public education system. Students do this in 6 years. Some students are accelerated. They finish the 6-year program, get their high school diploma and 2-year college associate's degree in 5 years or 4 years. And for the students that do it in 4 years, what's interesting is because college graduation is in May and high school graduation is in June. With P-TECH, we've actually had students graduate from college before they graduate from high school. So it's a little bit of the disruption of the model. Every P-TECH school has an industry partner to help ensure students are taking courses that will prepare them for the world of work and to be first in line for jobs upon graduation. And we also have a college partner for each P-TECH school that provides college coursework that high schools begin, some high school students begin as early as the 10th grade. Now, 10 years ago, when we started P-TECH, one of the first conversations we had around CTE and climate change happened when the director of sustainability at IBM and some IBM engineers actually pushed into a chemistry class in that Brooklyn high school. The IBM employees worked with the teacher to expand the conversation beyond flashcards about stoichiometry and the periodic table, and instead asked students if they were familiar with Hurricane Katrina. Do you students know how to get oil out of ocean water? What impact do you think Hurricane Katrina had on the health of people living in the Gulf? What impact did it have on the local economy? The IBM staff worked with the educators to create project-based learning exercises similar to actual challenges that the IBM workers had dealt with in the region. And just like that, sustainability education, a holistic model that connects the dots between different content areas in the environment, helped transform that classroom. Now, our approach to CTE and climate change continues to evolve. But currently, the way we think about this with P-TECH is along 4 different dimensions that require a robust collaboration between school districts, industry partners, and colleges. And those 4 dimensions are program design, credentialing, labor market intelligence, and being first in line for jobs. I know this is not the most beautiful slide, but I want you to hold all 4 of these dimensions in your mind as I talk through this. So with program design, we're really talking about environmental literacy, which we think of as career exploratory. It's about exposing students to careers, and technical training, which is actually preparing them to work in those careers. Now, with environmental literacy, every industry is evolving to become more sustainable. Our automotive industry is moving from fossil fuel-based cars to electric cars. Architecture and construction are utilizing green practices to reduce the carbon footprint of structures in the design and building stages. And environmental literacy is ensuring that students have a baseline knowledge about how the world is changing and also being able to apply that to real world scenarios. Now, this can happen in a chemistry class or in any content area. This is the exploratory aspect of CTE and sustainability. We want to expose students to this information so they can develop a broader viewpoint about how every class can be connected to how the world is changing. With technical training, this is actually about teaching the actual skills, knowledge bases, and competencies that would qualify someone to work in a role related to climate change or a green job. For automotive engineering with P-TECH, this means teaching them how to design and build electric vehicles. For construction, it means teaching them how to design whole building systems that are more energy efficient. This also means integrating internships or professional mentoring or apprenticeships into the technical training model in collaboration with industry partners, because we're actually preparing them to work in those jobs. Now, as a part of the CTE program design process years ago at the New York City Department of Education, we actually invited teachers from the schools to work with a company called the Cloud Institute to help integrate sustainability principles into existing environmental literacy and technical training curricula. Now, we did this through a process called curriculum mapping, where we basically opened up the textbooks, we mapped out the math, literacy, science, and other elements of the curricula and began integrating content that would help modernize the curriculum and reflect sustainability principles, practices, and skill sets. Closed it back up and started teaching that in the classroom with the students. In 2021, some of our P-TECH schools have already done this. They solely focus on sustainability or green industries. But this year, we're planning to launch an initiative that will make more of this content available for all of our programs. Now, the credentialing element gets into the question, how do you actually know that what you're teaching about sustainability or climate change is actually relevant for the world of work? We've looked at industry recognized credentials as the benchmark. So for example, a NABCEP certification for solar installation. NABCEP stands for the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. People who install solar, many of them have a NABCEP certification. GPRO, Green Professional, is a certification offered by the U.S. Green Building Council. Many of us are familiar with LEED buildings. GPRO is a certification they use. We also utilize co-planning models with high school teachers and college professors. So the content we're teaching in grades 9 through 12 is aligned with what colleges are teaching in grades 13 to 14 to qualify students to receive their associate's degree. Now, this design strategy is not an afterthought. Before the student even begins the PTech program, we're already thinking about what a certification or degree they're moving towards that will qualify them to work in this climate change related area. The third dimension is labor market intelligence. Before PTech was launched, one of the mistakes we made, I would say in New York, in the education and workforce development areas, is that we were training ahead of the curve. We were actually training individuals in solar installation before there were enough solar jobs available. And so we had individuals get these certifications and they couldn't get jobs in New York. They actually went to New Jersey to get solar jobs because New Jersey had created a market for solar that didn't exist in New York. So we began using labor market intelligence, which means understanding what jobs are available, where they're available, and what the required skills and credentials are for those jobs in our planning. Some of the resources we use are ONET Online. ONET is a resource managed by the U.S. Department of Labor, and Burning Glass is a labor market intelligence service that helps us understand what's on the horizon. And then last but not least, the last dimension is being first in line for jobs. Our industry partners don't promise to hire PTech students upon graduation, but they do commit to PTech students who are qualified being first in line for jobs. Quick examples, IBM has hired a number of students to work at their company nationally. Recently, NYPA, the New York Power Authority, committed to hiring students coming out of our programs to support their new solar installations that are being developed, and also for cybersecurity to protect our power grid infrastructure from cyber attacks. They're also offering 100 internships for students this year in PTech. And Tesla recently started hiring PTech students finishing their associate's degrees as production engineers. These are students who, they have full Tesla engineer salaries and stock options. Tesla stock options sound nice to me. And these are PTech students that are in the programs now. So these are the 4 dimensions of sustainability education that we're using for PTech. And then to close out, just some examples of some resources that we utilize to help do this. One is one of the 2 I'm going to show you really quickly over the next 60 seconds. This is Open PTech. Open PTech is a free online resource hosted by IBM. It's available for all PTech schools, and I believe they're beginning to open it up to all public schools. This has a number of channels. This is the sustainability education channel of a number of modules where students and teachers can log in remotely. They can access the content. Teachers can track where the students are. They receive digital badges for completing this work. So this is curriculum online that can support students and teachers engaging in this now. And this is a resource offered by Solar One. Solar One is probably one of the smartest shops nationally committed to environmental education and sustainability. They have a solar installation program specifically for CTE schools. They've trained thousands of teachers and students that participate in their programs. They get certifications. They partner with school districts. They focus on New York primarily. They also have something called the Green Design Lab, which allows schools to use their actual school building as a facility where they can measure energy and waste, et cetera, so they can track the real impact they're having on climate change. So this is what we're doing now, and we want to continue to expand this in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Diallo. And we will turn last but not least to Kevin.
Thank you, Governor Whitman, Secretary King, and the commissioners. Thank you for this invite to talk about our exciting work happening in Southwest Colorado. I'll tell you a little bit about our sense of place and my sense of place. I come to you today as a humble farm boy. My parents had 8th and 10th grade educations, but we always knew in our household that education was important. And again, that farm and ranch background gave me a zest for conservation, recycling, knowing that having that kind of impact, you see it when you're on the farm, you see the impact of climate. And our sense of place is that Southwest Colorado is a unique, amazing place. We have forests, we have rivers, we have lakes. We also have a legacy of mining. And We also have been devastated by wildfires and flooding and drought. And in fact, in Colorado, you can get all three within a year: a wildfire, a flood, and a drought. And I think that inspires all of us to want to do better by the planet. You can go ahead and go on to the next slide, please. And I'll talk about real briefly the districts at the bottom. I want you to say these are 5 school districts who've come together to work, from Silverton, that's under 100 students, to Durango, that's over 500. And we also have, over 5,000. So you're dealing with districts from 100 to 5,000 in this beautiful outdoor lab. We're also surrounded on most of our districts on the southern edge by the Hickory Apache Nation, the Southern Ute Tribal Nation, the Ute Mountain Ute Tribal Nation, and the Dene or Navajo Tribal Nation. And so we have this beautiful cultural context in which to have this outdoor laboratory. And so we formed also a 501c3 for the Colorado Education Collaborative, because just like Mr. Lee spoke of so eloquently, we believe that the work, that getting kids out into this amazing learning laboratory is the key. So we started working, remember, this was pre-COVID. 2019, we were working on this. We came through. Lots of things stopped during COVID. We all made the commitment to keep working. One other thing about this collaborative is we involve teachers and higher ed from the beginning. Most places in K-12, we kind of go through it. We go, oh, by the way, let's get college involved. And they have been partners at the table all along. And we've been really looking at what would work best for students, but also what would be best for our region. And the 2 areas we identified were building trades and environmental science, because of this beautiful outdoor laboratory we have. And so getting all these partners in the room isn't easy, but it's worth it. Next slide, please. Why environmental science? Let's turn back the clock over 100 years. To my graduate students, I teach an article that talks about the high school of the future. It's from February 1917. Outside, when you read the article, the only difference is they were talking about teaching Latin. In a lot of places, we have that high school experience. Many of you on the call may know this, but do you know why we teach it traditionally in high school: biology, chemistry, and physics? Because it's alphabetical. And so I have this passion around science, and the new NGSS standards are from that phenomenological experience, that we have to take science from the outside in. And all of the esteemed speakers today are talking about that. We've been speaking about how to get science from the outside. If we think science from inside a book and inside a microscope out is working, it's not, and it's not working for our students. So we wanted to be able to come together, expand opportunities for students. And last summer, during COVID, in August, we had 16 students and 9 teachers, including one of the teachers from our school district, involved in this. And also the other part of this, that if we go back to the new NGSS science standards and we look at the real work, that all the speakers, this is hands-on work, fostering cross-district collaboration for students to get in the outdoors and do project-based things that are their passion areas. So important. And these 9 educators, again, teacher up, these 9 educators have actually worked together to craft the program in conjunction with the higher ed partner at Fort Lewis. So all of these learners have a pathway into higher ed. Next slide, please. That is really important, because one of my other things that I really strongly believe about is when we get a kid a college class, they believe they're a college student, and regardless of your socioeconomic background. I'm the farm boy that wanted to take calculus, and I had a counselor tell me, why would a farm boy want to do that? And we all have these stories. And we want to give those great hands-on experiences, develop intentional workplace skills. Some of the people in our collaborative call them soft skills, which just is like nails on a chalkboard to me, because no one fires you softly if you don't have them. They are workplace skills, and we want to be able to do that as well. And then have that concurrent tie for that PK-16 that we've been speaking about. Next slide, please. We're going to play about 30 seconds of this video. This is our own Bayfield Wolverine student, Royce Hinojosa.
I'm really passionate. I chose to do this because I'm really passionate about the environment, and growing up here in Southwest Colorado, I've really grown to love our world, and so I find it important to kind of work for a sustainable future. I'm really excited about the things that we can do with it. I think that using our environment, we can go really far, especially if we protect it.
Thank you for playing that. Royce is he is a product of this beautiful laboratory that we live in Southwest Colorado. And being able to pick, you see some of the projects on the screen about butterflies and climate, with elementary and collecting data around that. So if we go back and think about, remember what I said earlier, we teach it because it's alphabetical: biology, chemistry, physics. If we go back, and that's why the physics first movement, the earth science movement, the environmental science first, because the kids can actually do the science. Next slide, please.
I chose to do this because
so how we got a jump start. We were working on this for over a year. Colorado's governor, Jared Polis, he started a street school. He's obviously very involved and very knowledgeable about education. And so they went through and awarded about 20 innovative education projects, even in the time of COVID. The single largest grant was $3.6 million for this project to do building trades and environmental science. Fort Lewis will continue to develop the classes so that there is a unique pathway for these students to matriculate to higher ed. We'll have additional programming, and realize these are also Fort Lewis people teaching kids. So we're creating that college-bound confidence and we're really hoping that having the innovative equipment, having these mobile labs, being able to have the hands-on equipment for our kids to go into this really amazing place that we live in and learn about science, and then also provide a diverse group of students a really unique opportunity. We're very proud of the work we're doing, that we've been able to continue it even during a pandemic. We did not let COVID be an excuse for providing amazing opportunities to our students. And again, thanks to the governor, the secretary, and the commissioners for inviting us to speak a little bit about our work with the ESSE, or Environmental Science and Climate Institute in Southwest Colorado, and our amazing partners. We have amazing school districts and amazing higher ed partners who are working through the challenges. So thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks to all our panelists. I have lots of questions, but I'm going to try to hold back a bit on them. But really, all of you are doing exciting work. I guess the first thing I'd like to ask Herb is, how many school districts do you now have involved in your projects?
Well, all of the things that we've done affect all of the schools statewide. In Hawaii, we have one central system that is statewide. I think we're the only state in the nation that has one public education system. So our current after-school program grant is in 9 schools on the north side of the island of Oahu. But all of our programs that we've developed over the last 25 years, we've gone to every island to train and to connect people with the same mindset that we started on our island on Oahu.
And that's a lot of work. How many funding partners do you have? You mentioned HUD. How many?
Yeah, we have the whole gamut. We get most of our money comes from the federal government, from the U.S. Department of Education under the Native Hawaiian Education Act. We have NOAA has been a constant funder for probably 10 or 12 years now. HUD, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, EPA. And then we have a lot of philanthropic local funders in Hawaii that have funded us. And then we also get state and city grants, grant and aids to help us, with both CIP or capital improvement projects as well as programmatic projects.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Diallo, how do students get into your programs? Are they chosen? Do they have to meet certain criteria grade-wise? How are they chosen?
Yeah, when I describe P-Tech to people, they think of it as like it must be a gifted and talented program or like one of the selective high schools, but these are actually public high schools with no test to get in. There's no screening process, so if you are a public student, living near a P-Tech school in your district, then you can qualify to go to that school. The only question that principals often ask parents is, because it's a 6-year commitment, is, are you sure you want to do this? But whatever application process for high school that district has, that student can apply to a P-Tech school.
Okay, so these are separate schools. These are not programs within other existing public schools. These
So
are
they're actually-
standalone, sort of like the other kinds of schools that we have that get so problematic. I won't even mention them, but
I know exactly what you mean. So, and actually,
it's
to be
kind of like a
candid,
charter.
yeah, there are 3 different models of the way that P-Tech is implemented in the state of New York. Some of them are standalone schools where every student in that school, in that P-Tech school, is in the P-Tech program. Some of them are schools where they've launched a P-Tech program within a school. So they may have multiple CTE programs and they have a P-Tech program within the school, but they still have a P-Tech principal. So it's kind of self-contained. Sometimes they do this from a funding standpoint. And then the third model is a BOCES model. So that's the board of certified educational services. New York City, has like a $30 billion education budget. Some smaller districts, they may say, we want a P-Tech school, but we can't afford all that equipment. So what they'll do is they will partner with other school districts and have a P-Tech at a particular location. And so multiple school districts will all send their students to that P-Tech school. So those are the 3 different ways that P-Tech is implemented in New York, but the model is designed to be self-contained. It's not supposed to be a separate model within a school that other students can't get access to.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have a bunch more questions, but Secretary King, it's your turn.
Thanks, Governor. Amara, I wonder if you could talk about, if you were in charge of school districts, what would you want them to do differently in terms of environmental education? What would have made your experience in K-12 within the school better?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I didn't have any formal outdoor learning initiatives in school. And so I think that is the first thing that I would advocate for, is really powerful outdoor learning initiatives. The Maine Environmental Education Association actually just launched a mini grant for educators in the state of Maine, where they can request funding for to support outdoor learning in their classrooms. And we were able to give funding to 1/7 of total public schools in the state of Maine. And we're in the midst of launching our spring mini grant cycle as well, due by popular demand from the educators. So there is a need. Educators would like to implement this learning in their classrooms, but I just don't think that enough support is available for educators to be able to do so. And I think coupled with this outdoor learning, there needs to be classroom-based environmental learning initiatives for students as well. A group that I work with, the Nature-Based Education Consortium Climate Education Working Group, we recently submitted a set of recommendations to the Maine Climate Council around intersectional climate justice education for all Maine youth. And so this actually made it into the Maine final climate action plan. And so some legislation is going to be kind of worked around how to incorporate this in Maine schools. So I think those are the 2 things that I would have liked in my K-12 education.
Great. Can you share those recommendations with us that you submitted? We'd love
of course.
to see them. Thank you. And then Superintendent Ayton, I wonder if you could talk about the RISE grant and how those dollars are translating into action so that other states might learn from the RISE experience.
Actually, it was something that grew out of the governor's passion, and I think all of our passion in our area is that we're not going to let a global pandemic, as I said, stand in the way of creating opportunities for children. And the governor really felt strongly about looking at these innovative programs, even in a pandemic, that could do some pretty amazing things for students. As I told you, we had been at this work for a year, so we were very strongly positioned to be in a good place. And so we were going to do the work. The RISE grant was actually a happy surprise. Like we were already looking at benefactors. We had been working, thinking, we'll get through this with finding those benefactors, finding money, finding grants, subsidizing it from our district. What the $3.6 million allows us to do is buy equipment, buy, like I said, the mobile learning labs, have some staff time who can work on this as their full-time job, which I think is also important. This can't be something we ask a teacher to do during a prep period. Can we take teacher input? Can we do that? Yes, but having a full-time person to do it. And then it gives us that incredible jump start. So I think from a policy standpoint is that what we could all look at are find these innovative programs that are going on and my terms as a farm boy, fertilize it and water it and grow it. Because I think that's what's happened. The RISE grant is fertilizing, watering, and growing our program.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Murguia, President and CEO of Unidos US. We're the largest Latino civil rights and advocacy organization in the country. I'm very pleased to be part of the commission and have thoroughly enjoyed working with Secretary King in the past. And thank you, Governor Whitman, for your leadership. This has been a really wonderful panel. I wanted to ask, and I see Carla Thompson-Payton, we work closely at Unidos US with the Kellogg Foundation. So thank you all for so many of your contributions. I wanted to ask Diallo, I'm struck by Secretary of Education recently confirmed Cardona, and I know Secretary King feels this way. They describe community colleges as the nation's best kept secret. I actually have a family member who went on to community college, went on to public education, a state university, and then went to Harvard. I mean, these community colleges end up being really great bridges off into other opportunities, but nearly half of Latinos and nearly half of Latinos in post-secondary education attend community colleges, but only 21% graduate. I was intrigued, Diallo. Studies show the promising completion rates for P-TECH students who finish their associate's degrees within 2 years at 4 times the rate of their peers. What is the current scale of P-TECH in the US, and what role can maybe the federal government serve in supporting these kinds of public-private partnerships?
Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, community colleges are critical partners for P-TECH. The CUNY school system, City University of New York, for our New York City schools, partner with them. Most of them partner with community colleges. Almost all of our P-TECH schools upstate partner with SUNY schools, community colleges, and it's a partnership that is critical in the planning process and making sure the students have access to early education. P-TECH schools are also have been replicated in Connecticut, in Texas, in Louisiana. I believe they're kind of had conversations in the Midwest and in California right now. And so right now, I believe that I think globally, there are about 120,000 students in P-TECH. Most of them, the largest group of P-TECH schools are in the state of New York. I think Texas is second, but there are many different opportunities to continue to scale P-TECH. One of the things that we've seen about CTE generally is that CTE is a bipartisan issue. It's something that both sides of the aisle kind of agree on. Launched under the Obama administration, even under the previous administration, with all the critical things I can and would like to say. They ensure that P-TECH continue to qualify for Perkins funding, which is specifically allocated for CTE programs, and making sure that P-TECH continues to have access to Perkins funding and other forms of federal funding is critical. It's also important, I think, to prioritize supporting community colleges to have stronger partnerships with secondary education and creating opportunities and incentives for industry partners to partner with P-TECH type schools as well. So the funding resources, prioritizing certifications and credentials, I think will allow us to continue to expand P-TECH nationally.
That's great. I just have one other question I wanted to ask Herb Lee. I was very impressed by your presentation. Your work, sort of centers culture in environmental education curriculums. And I was just curious how teachers and students who participated in these programs responded to this approach, shifting maybe their own mindsets and perspectives and allowing them to sort of tap into this cultural history. We've been working a lot on narrative change, and I know this is really important in terms of people understanding and connecting history with the education and the way that people view communities of color and understand that. Can you maybe tap into that a little bit for me? Respond?
Sure. You know, over the last 25 years, I've seen a tremendous shift in the institution of public education in Hawaii to really embrace the idea of going outside of the four walls of the school to incorporate, you know, every time I get a chance, I always tell our partners, you know, in the education system that in Hawaii, and this is my own bias, we live in one of the greatest community classrooms on the planet because of our weather. We can take our kids outside. We don't have to travel far, and we hardly ever do it. So to me, the basic thing about culture is that, you know, it is about relationships, and it's about, you know, history and genealogy and understanding, you know, as I said in my presentation, understanding the relationship to Aina, or the land and the sea, that which feeds us. And I think I can boil it down to three very simple concepts, which is part of the education speak. You know, I grew up, you know, learning that it's about rigor, relevance, and relationships, right? But I've kind of flipped that and saying that it really starts with relationships first, relationships to each other, relationship to the places in which we live, which is part of our culture. And then comes the relevance. How do we incorporate the content of what we're learning, whether it's indigenous wisdom or the bridge to contemporary science and technology? You know, how do we apply that in a relevant way to make a meaningful difference? And then, in my experience, if you can accomplish those first two steps, you can set the rigor bar anywhere you want, and those kids will be able to reach it because now they're super motivated. And on top of that, what we found is that, you know, when we come at it from that kind of cultural perspective, and whether, you know, these are not just for Hawaiian people, this is for everybody that lives in Hawaii that we feel has a responsibility to care for the place in which they live, whether you're Hawaiian or not. With students coming away from actually now being able to apply knowledge in a relevant way to these places like the fish pond or the farms. And by the way, I love what Dr. Aiton was saying about, you know, that connection as well. And having them actually feel like they're making a meaningful difference in addressing some of the problems within their own backyards and their own communities. That is profound learning. That is profound learning. And that's where I believe, you know, the culture, you know, and we have microcultures in Hawaii too. You know, I have the mindset that even within schools, you know, with leadership and things like that, they kind of have their own culture. And we have to really figure out ways to better tap into that, and to be able to allow them to thrive and connect in meaningful ways, you know, from, you know, 100 yards from the school to, you know, an eighth of a mile to a half of a mile to 2 miles, you know, and just kind of look at it as concentric circles and begin to develop relationships with the resources of the community that these schools surround, so that the schools actually become sort of a hub for all of this wonderful interconnection.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
And this is Valerie Rockefeller. I chair the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which works on primarily sustainable development and democratic practice, which are, of course, inextricably linked. But right now I am in Wyoming with my kids on spring break. So sort of the opposite environment of where Herb is now. And my kids do come here every summer and go to the Teton Science School, which runs camps in the summer and does a lot of professional development. Here in Wyoming, they use place-based education instead of environmental education. And the word climate is not a great one, especially if you're wanting to bring in teachers from rural areas. So I think my question is primarily for Dr. Aiton, but I invite feedback from anyone on how we do change the narrative that Janet referred to in what language is most inclusive.
I'll give you a humble opinion. It doesn't make me right, but I'll give you a humble farm boy opinion. I think we need to talk about conservation, which is the word that I used. I think that's really important. And this outside in concept. If we can do nothing else in schools, take the darn field trip in the fall rather than in the spring, right? Get the students outside. That we're all saying that. That's my aside, and my soapbox moment. But I think if we speak to rural America about conservation, about recycling, about things that make sense first. Also, some of the environmental factors we're seeing. I talked about wildfires, floods, drought, weather patterns, environmental. And Wyoming shares with Colorado that the environmental science is in the Colorado and Wyoming standards early on. It is not, it tends to be, and I think it's 8th grade in Wyoming, 9th grade ish in Colorado. And so I think that's important. Stop teaching science, biology, chemistry, and physics. The looking in the microscope, memorizing a list of terms is not science. The science standards with the phenomenological approach are really about that. Study something, do science, get the kids into their place. And then as Amara spoke about, then there has to be some classroom pieces to it as well. And I think that's important, but get them out into that learning laboratory. I'm just giving you an opinion, Ms. Rockefeller. I think we need to speak about conservation. I think that would be a much better narrative.
Just for 30 seconds to add to this, Valerie, I think we have to connect the dots. When it comes to, the 3 pillars of sustainable development are economic, environmental, and social. And I try to make sure that we're talking about them all at the exact same time. It's what is the economic impact that this has on our local, national, or global economy? What are the social impacts of this in terms of health, et cetera? And when you have a more holistic conversation around it, then it allows you to really kind of like couch the environmental inflammatory language about what's causing it, and instead say, well, some of this stuff is showing up, every day for us, in terms of how we're living our lives. And having that holistic conversation, I think, helps move past the trigger for some people culturally and connect it to things that are very realistic for them. So instead of arguing about what caused Hurricane Katrina, we can have a conversation about the impact that it's having on people's lives and the skill sets and the knowledge bases that we need to address it. And it doesn't have to be a natural disaster. We can do that at the local level as well. There are local issues in every community that I think could be context for these types of conversations.
And Diallo, farmers understand drought and flood.
Absolutely.
And the economic impact of that. And I thank you for filling that in, because I sort of assumed that people would see that there is an economic shell to this. So thank you.
I want to add, 2 things. One is, in my experience, what we try to do is create a small success. And over 25 years, these small successes have created these ripples in the pond, so to speak, to create even more success and begin to adapt a mindset among the people that have sort of drunk the Kool-Aid in our professional development with teachers, to adopt this idea that, hey, there is a really great viable alternative in terms of how we can teach kids. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I think coming along with that, creating that small success is, the social emotional attachment. And really short story, when 25 years ago, when we started restoring our fish pond, I get a call from a local high school science teacher that was teaching these kids, at-risk kids. And she called me and said, hey, Herb, I heard what you guys are doing. I'm a science teacher. I'm not reaching my kids in the classroom teaching them science. Can I bring them down to your pond and teach them science in a different way? And I hooked them up with our university scientists, aquaculture specialists. And that was the transformational moment for us. That, 9 months later, we saw this amazing transformation in these kids. And we asked ourselves 3 questions. Can we duplicate this? Can we reach more kids? And imagine if we could actually start them with an experience like this when they were in pre-kinder or kindergarten, what they would look like by the time they became high schoolers. That was profound. And we've been on this journey since then. And I got to tell you, it works. When people make that social emotional connection to place, and they see the vitality of how these kids are being reached in a different way, but they don't even know they're learning science, but they're doing it. that is the formula for success, and that is going to be the game changer.
So, Laura, I'll jump in for the last question then to Mara. My name is Lisa Hoyos, League of Conservation Voters. It's a follow-up to what you already said. So you talked about doing advocacy with the Nature-Based Education Consortium, and I was wondering what your experience is engaging some of the youth you're leading with in your other work around moving policymakers, lobbying policymakers, and what has been the impact of that from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, Lisa. I would say that, when it comes to organizing, when it comes to pushing for the future us youth are trying to realize, I think as a youth, I can speak to my personal experience as well as the experiences that others have shared. The comfortable place is grassroots level organizing, doing climate strikes, going out and advocating for the environment that way. But when it comes to policy level work, that is something that youth are really, I'm still learning about, that youth would like to explore more about. And so in doing that policy level work, we are so grateful to have intergenerational collaboration. I think intergenerational collaboration is the surefire way to spark social change, learning from different perspectives and understanding different inputs. So in that, doing this policy level work through the Maine Climate Council, we've been able to partner with adults who have engaged in this work for years and kind of be able to be mentored by them in this policy level work. And I would also say that when it comes to this policy level work, the support that youth, I think, really need in that regard, it's just getting opportunities to engage in this way. One initiative that my organization is kind of leading is kind of a board takeover of these conservation organizations, as you mentioned, Kevin, and having youth be able to serve in these positions. These conservation organizations do a lot of policy level work. So giving youth that experience to engage on a board is a completely transformative experience and would really help to inform the work that they do at the state policy level. And with that, I actually do have to go, but I just wanted to voice so much gratitude to you all for the opportunity to serve on this panel and just join this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amara.
Everyone.
Well, with that, we want to thank all of our panelists for their willingness to share your time and thoughts and insights with us, and we will carry that into the work on developing the action plan. Governor Whitman, would you like to close us out?
Sure. Again, thank you to all of the panelists. And now as the commissioners have gotten to know, we will get off the broader spectrum and move into our breakout groups. We'll do that, and everybody will be asked to join a group. So as you know, click on that group, join it, and then we'll come back and have a general meeting afterwards. For all of those who are watching this on YouTube or the other internet services, thank you very much for participating. I think it was an exciting panel. And thank you again to all the panelists.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Emily, are we good?
One second.
All right.